Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is Christopher Sweat, and he's a congressional candidate in Colorado, and he's here to talk with me about the migrant crisis because Colorado is a sanctuary state. So, Chris, give us an overview of what's exactly happening in Colorado and in the district that you're running in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, my district for Coloradoans is basically mapped to Greater El Paso County. So here, Colorado Springs is the largest city in the district. I think there's like two conversations happening around immigration. There are perceptions, which I think, voters are sharing quite a bit of fear and concern with me about if like, you know, if crime is increasing, how is that going to impact their property values? Will their kids be safe when they're out playing? Uh, you know, do some people that I know haven't locked their door in many years, and now they lock their doors on their home and their car because there's been certain kinds of upticks and motor vehicle theft or other types of crime. So I think there's the perception that the immigrant populations, the illegal immigration patterns are driving crime. And I think that is like a small bit of the truth. But I think the reality is there's like lots of drivers for crime right now, like defunding police, the impact of the pandemic on the economy,
Mm.
and then also these like very, I guess what we're seeing are like pretty extreme immigration flows that are coming out of Texas. Uh, I think Texas had felt like they had to distribute the burden on other states, so they decided to bus or plane immigrant populations into regions that are considered sanctuary areas. But let's be like real about this for a moment. I grew up hunting all over the state of Colorado as well as out on the eastern and southeastern plains. So we've always had immigrants in Colorado. And we've also always had illegal immigrants in Colorado. And maybe that has been more or less of a priority depending on public sentiment. And so I think the public perception of immigration is that it's very negative right now, because it's like, how will it affect all these other important systems? Like, for example, where will we house all of these new immigrants? How will we pay the tax burden when we're already paying crazy amounts of money for real estate and groceries and education? And then when will these immigrant populations be productive if they're to stick around? A lot of family friends that I talk to and just constituents in passing uh, have maybe more like a hardline approach where they would like to just oust immigrant populations from the United States.
Mhm.
It's probably similar to how people thought about Italians, Jews, Irish people. It's not, these aren't like new, this is not like a new conversation in American discourse, but Black Americans at a certain point, right? This perception that there's a new group that's dangerous and violent, that threatens our existence. And so I think to a degree, there is probably an argument that, say some of the immigrants are coming from Venezuela. Venezuela is a very poor country right now under basically a dictatorship, right? Nicolas Maduro ran an election this year, I think it was in July, and it's being questioned if the election was legitimate. And there were massive protests in Venezuela. Venezuela has been dealing with hyperinflation. The people in other parts of the world are taught, hey, if I want opportunity or if I want to get away from this autocratic government, I better go to the land of milk and honey, right? The place where the American dream is a possibility for safety. And I think there's people that exploit that. But also there is a willing population of people that are somehow able to travel thousands of miles to cross the southern border. And so I empathize with the kind of like the fear, anger, and resentment, but I wouldn't want to stoke it. For example, like at the local level, which is not in my jurisdiction running for a U.S. congressional seat, we defunded police and have been providing very limited funding and support to local law enforcement. So if the local law enforcement is already struggling to enforce the law and clamp down on crime, immigration just adds an additional strain and another dimension to the struggle that law enforcement's dealing with. My thought is that we come up with a meaningful path to showing the police that we respect them and that we need them to continue to work hard, and we need to provide them with additional resources,
Let
to
me,
do their job.
let me ask you this question. If one or more than one illegal immigrant comes into this country and they want to figure out where they want to go, and if they know that a certain area wants to defund the police, if they've got a proclivity to lawlessness, they would want to go to that area to kind of like continue to do their thing. Would you agree with that?
Actually, I think the decision-making ability of immigrants in Latin America is very limited because of a lack of education and resources in their home country. Hence why they have fled to here. And the immigrant populations aren't coming in with technical skills or, many of the immigrant populations that people are discussing coming from the South are coming up with very limited low levels of education
Okay.
or economic, I don't know, ability. So they're not making like advanced decisions on where to live. What's actually happening is they come through the southern border, and then a legislator like the governor of Texas mobilizes planes and buses and
Okay.
then distributes them into sanctuary cities, right? That's not the decision making of the immigrants. And then when they get to the sanctuary regions, the communities already have a very obvious structure of segregation. And so they push those populations into those areas that don't necessarily have the political or social capital to push the immigrant populations elsewhere, right? It's not like they're pushing the immigrants into the Broadmoor, like I was saying earlier, which is a very wealthy neighborhood in my district. They're, pushing them into an already resource constrained part of Aurora, Colorado. And, some of the, in my district, some of the areas where there's already a lot of homelessness congregating.
Mm-hmm. So has it gotten more severe over the past couple of years?
Well, I mean,
Right.
there's a number of things that have gotten more severe over the last couple of years, right? Like less funding to police,
Yeah,
extraordinary inflation,
right.
uh, extended unemployment, which is slowly increasing and being downplayed by the government, and then crime, just broadly. And so I think the immigrant populations are maybe exacerbating some of these issues. But I don't think anybody's looked at like how much of this is like just what America's dealing with. Which
Mhm.
was which to a degree, I mean, like we have like buildings and statues named after fraudsters that like seized power. We've had our own gang issues, right? With the mafia and other forms of organized crime. And we're also a hyper consumer of drugs. So 60% of the pharmaceutical industry distributes drugs in the United States, right? So the whole world market share, 60% is just the United States, okay? And then we're the global consumer for cocaine and marijuana and other illicit substances, right? So
What about
Americans,
fentanyl?
yeah, what about fentanyl, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Fentanyl obviously is causing additional issues, right, that are extending this crisis around opiates. Before I was 25, I probably went to at least five funerals that were opiate related deaths. And I'm 35 now, so this, so in my youth, obviously in Colorado Springs, opiates were a problem. But I also think like Americans have a cultural issue where it's okay to consume drugs at scale across all walks of life. And so like if we want to tamp down on drug distribution, for example, because to be candid, Venezuelan a random Venezuelan immigrant is not moving the kind of drugs that you would want to be able to consume in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Denver, New York City, right? It takes a large scale drug operation to supply those kinds of drugs. To
Mhm.
be candid, if we look at like politics in Mexico, for example, which we should really have a better relationship with Mexico. Mexico's politicians are embedded with gangs, drug lords, militant groups, and those groups have the power to oust political leaders in Mexico. If Mexican political leaders don't satisfy their whims, why, I'm running for a federal seat. Why don't we improve our relationship with Mexico? So maybe we can show them how to clamp down on gangs and crush gangs and get gangs out of their domestic area and help them build new industries in collaboration to kind of marginalize the drug production, the illicit drug production that takes place in Mexico. And
Mhm.
then, hey, Americans, why don't we stop consuming drugs, right? Like,
Right.
obviously, we have a drug consumption problem.
Right.
You could be in Washington, D.C., and they found cocaine in the White House. But it's not, that
Right.
probably is not the only cocaine that's being consumed in the White House. There's a demand for cocaine in America. Why? Right. Like, I think immigration is a chance to try to externalize American issues
Mhm.
and straw man, these ideas. But in reality, like we have serious problems in America right now,
Mhm.
and immigration is like 1/20th or maybe 1/30th of the issues that we're facing in this country.
So you don't think it's in the top five?
The local law enforcement can't bring law and order because they have almost no funding. Look at the district attorneys around uh, the state of Colorado, but also around the country
Mhm.
uh, that are trying to find ways to not put people in prison. But the prisons are full. Like it's probably every single day I talk to somebody that works for the Colorado Department of Corrections, whether it is parole, probation, people that are actually working in the prisons. And they describe to me the effect of policies on the prison system. And when the pandemic started, we basically released like a whole slew of convicted criminals back into our society. Some of the crimes that people were able to get out for were probably considered, more violent crimes. And so we released a whole bunch of people out of prison when the pandemic happened. That was just a few years ago, and the prisons are brimming. So the law enforcement's out in the field. They have, their limited resources. Their department shrunk after the pandemic, so they have less officers today than they did 4 years ago. And then the DA is trying to figure out what's the best crimes that they can prosecute, but the prison system is full. So now they're like, well, I don't even have a place to put people. And it's not like we're, providing more funding to law enforcement or prisons. So then again, that's just dealing with American issues. Now, on top of that, we have immigration challenges. So if the system is already shattered, right, the immigrants are just kind of maybe exacerbating people's perceptions of issues that already exist here that we really need to focus on and resolve. Like in Colorado, we legalized recreational marijuana in 2014. All right, let's get every single person that has been incarcerated at the federal and state level for marijuana out of the federal and state prisons. It's seriously a joke. This is a pen, but I appreciate that the state legalized marijuana for recreational consumption, and I appreciate that I can buy it in a retail setting from people that I trust. But in my congressional district, the largest city, Colorado Springs, bans the sale of recreational marijuana, doesn't even get a benefit from the new tax base that was established from the consumption of legal, domestically produced, locally sourced cannabis products, right? Why don't we get the people who are in prison for marijuana, which quite frankly is a joke, out, and then let's supply the local law enforcement with the resources they need to arrest people who are being disorderly and open up some seats in the prison for the parts of the immigrant populations that are struggling to integrate into our society. But beyond that, to me, immigration is an opportunity for economic development. I don't know if people recognize this too. Angela Merkel in 2014-15 was the chancellor of Germany, and I actually think she put a pretty decent immigration policy in place that was considered contentious. But remember, there was a civil war in Syria in 2014 that was framed as a war of some domestic factions and ISIS, but in reality, America pushed ISIS into Syria, okay? In 2014, the Obama administration entered the Syrian civil war, US intervention in the Syrian civil war. Okay, the Syrian civil war displaced 12 million people, 6.5 million people that were displaced from US intervention, okay? Fled. They had to move out of the region. 1.5 million Syrians immigrated to Germany, and there was a point where they were caught up on the Germany-Austria border. And what Angela Merkel did was she created a very rigid policy that forced the large population of immigrants into Germany's education system and culture, and forced that population, whoever could, to learn German and to learn the language, and gave people the ability to work jobs legally so that they could become taxpayers as quickly as possible, right? So I think in the United States, we have to be more honest about how immigration flows work and how disruptive our policies are internationally, and how we affect immigration patterns. 350,000 civilians died in Syria, okay? So Syrians had a legitimate justification for immigration. Sure, it's hard to integrate some of the cultural and some of the issues that Syrians probably faced in Syria into a European or American society. But we know that you can't take 1 million immigrants and oust them because, you know, it violates international law and human rights agreements and, you know, a whole host of other supply chain issues. Like in the United States, it's not like local law enforcement works with or for the FBI. It's not like ICE works with the county. It's not, you know, it's not like federal law enforcement and state and local law enforcement are one department underneath each other. They're completely separate. And there's a reason we do that here in the US. But because of this, we have this like extreme supply chain issue where there's like the national and international conversation on immigration and all the policy making that needs to take place in that arena. And then, you know, all the way down to state and local. And I think the states and local get battered by federal policy, but hey, state, stop defunding state police and prisons. Like, who's telling people to defund prisons? Hey, local, stop defunding the police. Who was telling people to defund the police? Obviously, we need the police, especially in these scenarios where we have people who are not familiar with our country and don't have a lot of resources and maybe come disorderly at certain parts of their stay here, right?
Two questions. Do you think a lot of the people that are coming into this country are victims of United States policies throughout the world? That's my first question. And my second question is, when you go around to the constituents in your district, do they talk about or do they ask you if immigration is a serious concern that lawmakers should be more mindful of?
Yeah, immigration is definitely a serious concern in my district.
Okay.
And hence why I'm expanding the conversation to a more practical discussion versus a fear-mongering discussion.
Okay.
Right, because there are a lot of systems that engage with immigration. And
So, do you think, like, if you put the news on, if you put on any of the cable stations or you listen to the mainstream media, do you think that a lot of the stuff that they project to the citizens is fear-mongering?
certainly.
Okay.
And there's a number of institutions that supply capital to political entrepreneurs whose sole purpose is to tap into the grievances, the grievance structure that exists in society to hopefully at some point provoke mass mobilization, right? Like protests, civil unrest, or, you know, certain types of targeted violence. So we have a whole industry, a very well developed industry of political entrepreneurs that frame images or messages in a certain context to scare the heck out of people and to hopefully motivate them to do something violent or to put pressure on government or bureaucracy. And we saw this with the UK riots in July, right? We don't even have to go this far back into history, right? A lot happened in July. The UK riots, somebody framed a person who, it's a terrible person that killed 3 young children. Somebody framed them as a Muslim asylum seeker. And then violence erupted, like mass violence, right? In the UK, mass violence. And they had to go to a very extreme, very rigid form of law and order that you don't normally see in Democrat countries to stem the extraordinary combustion of violence. And again, they framed this man who very sadly killed these 3 young children as a Muslim asylum seeker, which he was not. And then, you know, a number of factions organized people and mass violence, mass protest in the UK. So in American media, maybe the immigration issue is not getting fair coverage, especially in my district. But for whatever reason, on the internet, what is circulating is a video of people that are assumed to be associated with a Venezuelan gang carrying arms in an apartment in Aurora. The video doesn't supply the address. It doesn't talk about the broader issue. And it turns out that video is circulating right now, but the Aurora police arrested 4 of those people in July. Okay. And so now you have this video that's circulating post hoc after the fact on social media. Clearly, that is, you know, some kind of political entrepreneurship that's trying to stoke or provoke or tap into fear, hate, and resentment. Now, I'm gonna tell you what, I grew up around guns. I grew up hunting. You know, Colorado, in my opinion, has some good gun laws for gun owners. But I don't need random people running around my neighborhood with guns like what you see in the video. So I would just as soon provide law enforcement with the resources to crush those groups immediately. I don't want to talk about xenophobia or hatred for, I don't even want to label them as Venezuelan gangs. Our law enforcement should be empowered to crush all gangs immediately. I don't think that has anything to do with nationality or immigration. No gangs should be able to operate domestically. If 5 men want to run around with arms, law enforcement should be able to crush them. That's my perspective.
Nobody's got a crystal ball, but what do you envision will be the ultimate outcome of illegal immigration in the United States?
Yeah, the same as it's always been, right? We'll have some groups who integrate better. Okay, and then people will make all these like supremacy, ethnic, religious, whatever arguments you see all the time. The Europeans were making these arguments in the 16 and 1700s, right? 1800s. Like it's not a new thing. And some other populations will integrate better. And what we'll have to do is face the reality that we're going to have to integrate a new group of immigrants, like we've done so many times. And the question is, are we going to do it in a way that benefits Americans? Or are we going to do it in a way where we're just going to create these new pockets of extreme poverty and we're going to bar people from broader economic participation and continue the legacy of this kind of like dishonesty of what the American dream is or isn't, right? So my thought, oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Would you like to see the border closed?
Yeah, but also I'd like to see Americans stop buying drugs. Okay. There's the supply chain that brings drugs through Central America, you know, South America, Central America, Mexico. It's built for it's built to supply a market that has extraordinary demand. So, and why, and again, why don't we have diplomatic ties with Mexico? Like, why isn't the president of the United States sitting down with Claudia, who will take the seat in October, and saying, hey, how can we work together to marginalize the drug traffic coming across the border and come up with some better policies for our economies to grow together, right? Like, why isn't the president going down to Colombia or, you know, some of these other countries in Central and South America, and trying to establish diplomatic ties and coordination, so that we can collaborate with all these other parties that are involved in immigration. Does American decision making create or exacerbate immigration flows? Oh my God.
Mhm.
We broke international law in 03. We killed Saddam Hussein and crushed a government. Iraq is still in shambles. We spent 20 years chasing the Taliban around Central and South Asia. The
Mhm.
Taliban runs Afghanistan. That country's in shambles. I mean, like, we fought the war on terrorism around the Middle East. We tore up the Middle East. It's in shambles. Of course, people immigrate when American hard power or American military operations are running, and there's international law that allows people to seek asylum or get refugee status. And then again, people see America as the beacon of hope and freedom and a place where they can achieve their dreams, because we spend trillions of dollars projecting this ideology through the international system. So I think that we should come up with some policies on immigration that hold us accountable as like the greatest country on the planet. And then also get back to economics and economic development, and strengthening our all levels of law enforcement, and then, you know, focusing on the issues that we have here at home, because they're pretty bad. You know, America has hard power, which is military capabilities, but also soft power, which is more economic. So we could drain your economy, you know, through an IMF loan, and weaken your state, stimulate some kind of issues domestically. Governments are known to sponsor militant groups, right? They say Iranian proxies, right? America has proxies too.
Right.
What happens when we sponsor that kind of violence? In Sudan right now, there
Mhm.
will be Sudanese that migrate to the United States, I assure everyone. There's 8 or 10 million people displaced. You can actually see the bodies stacking in Sudan from satellite images. My congressional district houses NORAD, US Space Command, Fort Carson, the US Air Force Academy, Schriever, and Peterson. My district, 50% of our economy is aerospace and defense. This is one of the most highest concentrations of aerospace and defense in the nation in my district. Let's come up with some solutions. The military does other things, like brings incredible, vast amounts of technological innovation, and there's probably a lot of great jobs that come off of aerospace and defense. But in Sudan, you have Russia, who seems like they can do whatever they want at this moment, and some private capital flowing out of the Middle East, just sponsoring violence, literally sponsoring violence in Sudan. And so we will see Sudanese immigrants to the United States, because this is what happens when there's violent conflict. People leave and they think maybe they can do better here, you know?
Oh, wow. This has really been an enlightening conversation. And I hope to stay in touch with you because I'm very impressed with what you have to say. Tell everybody what district you're in and
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, Cynthia, I appreciate your time having a conversation about immigration. It's definitely an important issue. I'm on the ballot for the general election November 5th. Christopher Sweat, running for House of Representatives in Colorado's 5th congressional district,
Right.
through the Forward Party.
So, you have a website and Facebook page and everything?
Yeah, actually, if everyone wants, just Google Christopher Sweat and all of my stuff comes up. Christopher Sweat for Congress. You can find me on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. I mean, TikTok. I'm on everything.
Oh,
Christopher
great,
Sweat.
great.
Yes.
So you've been listening to Christopher Sweat, who's running in Colorado for a congressional seat. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. So if you like this program, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Chris, it was a pleasure talking with you. Thank everybody for listening. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Cynthia.